This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a new season of the award-winning Adventures in Compliance, the podcast where we look at the Sherlock Holmes short stories, movies, novels, and related material from the angle of compliance. The casebook of Sherlock Holmes is the final set of 12 out of a total of 56 Sherlock Holmes short stories published by author Conan Doyle. These were published, of course, in the Strand magazine between October 1921 and April 1927. The books are two of the short stories, The Adventure of the Veiled Lodger and The Old Shuscombe Old Place, were the last of the Sherlock Holmes works protected by copyright. Although some of the stories are comparable with earlier works, many people feel that this is a lesser offering of Holmes, to which I wholeheartedly disagree. I hope that you will join us for this exploration of the final collected works of Sherlock Holmes as we take a deep dive literally into business ethics, leadership, investigative strategies, pattern recognition, and perhaps even portending the use of AI and generative AI as a tool for the compliance profession. There are some great stories in here, and I know you will enjoy them, and I hope you will enjoy this season of Adventures in Compliance really as much as I've enjoyed reading the stories. Today we're going to take up one of the least known of the 56 A. Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes short stories by looking at lessons from The Adventure of the Veiled Lodger. We're going to have a quick word from our network sponsor, Ethico, then we'll be right back.
If you're a compliance officer, middle managers are crucial in getting your programs from you to your frontline employees. But how do we activate those managers and get them on our side? Ethico's new Middle Manager Toolkit equips you with the skills needed to empower your managers, to promote a culture where ethical behavior thrives and employees feel empowered to speak up. Learn how to turn frontline managers into ethical leaders with our new white paper, Empowering Middle Managers as Ethics Champions. And did I mention you can get the whole toolkit for free? Head to ethico.com to download the full toolkit today.
And now, The Adventure of the Veiled Lodger. As Conan Doyle showed us long before Alfred Hitchcock did, you never know where you are with lodgers. This is particularly true if you're living in a Sherlock Holmes story. If they're not heavily bearded men who turn out to be chain-smoking ladies mixed up with mysterious red circles, then they are sinister American gangsters prone to leaving coded messages on their girlfriend's sundial. Or you could be poor Mrs. Marylow, who rented a room to an unusual lodger who has never shown her face, not knowingly anyway, but with keen eyes, sharp nose, and a merciless curiosity that so many private landlords seem to have in their nature. She did catch a glimpse of the woman's face, all horribly scarred and mutilated, ghastly. None of which was Mrs. Marylow's concern, of course. What her tenants wanted to walk around looking alike was their concern and not hers. But now the young lady has taken to waking up the household with deathly screams. Cries of murder, murder ring throughout the night. You cruel beast, you monster. Her health is suffering too. The poor girl is wasting away. But when Ms. Marylow offers to call the police, the lodger begs her not to. If she must involve anyone, it should be Sherlock Holmes. In fact, it must be Sherlock Holmes, and to make sure he knows that it all involves a message for him. Abbas Parva. The words mean nothing to Mrs. Marylow, but Holmes understands immediately. It refers to a horrible case involving a circus lion who got loose and attacked two people, a husband and wife team that regularly performed with the beast and who cared for it and fed it. The husband was killed and the wife was savagely scarred, although the police wondered why the animal would have so shockingly turned on the two people it trusted. They accepted that wild animals remain wild, no matter how sweet and cuddly you may think they are. Look at the poor jellyfish in our most recent story. Holmes hastens to the room of the woman, Mrs. Ronder, to to find her preparing to die. She is clearly contemplating suicide, but wishes to do so with a clear conscience. Her husband had been a monster, she explains, cruel to her and cruel to the animals. She had taken a lover, a circus strongman, and together they had plotted her husband's demise, a fake lion attack using a club with 5 nails in it. They bashed in the man's head. Then, to complete the facade, they released the lion, who promptly attacked her, at which point the strongman ran away screaming. Holmes cannot help but feel pity for the woman. He would not inform the police, but she must not give up. Life is always worth living, no matter how lousy the hand one has to play with it. Even when she lifts the veil and shows him what remains of her face, Holmes remains calm. She is beautiful inside. Mrs. Ronder appears to believe them at Holmes as well. 2 days later, a package arrives from Mrs. Ronder. It contains a bottle of prussic acid, which she had planned to do the deed. She has chosen life over death. And now, what are the lessons on institutional justice and institutional fairness from the Veiled Lodger? For the compliance professional, this story provides some very interesting lessons on institutional justice and institutional fairness. This was introduced to the compliance community by the Department of Justice in their 2020 update to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs and continued in the 2024 update. It emphasizes that corporate investigations must be conducted with fairness and transparency. In this story, Holmes refrains from a one-size-fits-all approach. He considers the circumstances of the Veiled Lodger before determining an appropriate course of action. Compliance officers must do the same, ensuring that investigations are not just swift, but fair and contextual. Second, accountability without retaliation. The ECCP update stresses that compliance programs must be applied consistently, not used as a weapon to punish selected employees. For the compliance professional, the lesson is Eugenia, the Veiled Lodger, her silence was driven by fear, much like employees who hesitate to report misconduct when they see selective enforcement, and that's internal enforcement. A culture of fairness requires equal accountability for all, literally from the boardroom to the shop floor. In addition to the accountability without retaliation, number 3 is encouraging whistleblowers and protecting them from harm. Obviously, the 2024 ECCP underscored the critical role of whistleblower protections in compliance effectiveness. Employees must feel safe in not simply reporting the misconduct, but there will be no fear of retaliation or bias. For the compliance professional, the lesson is that Eugenia Ronder's plight mirrors that of many whistleblowers trapped in unfair systems. Without institutional support, she suffered in silence. Holmes' empathy highlights why compliance programs must actively encourage and protect whistleblowers. 4, address systemic failures that enable misconduct. The ECCP's latest revisions emphasize that compliance professionals should not just punish bad actors, but also identify and remediate systemic weaknesses. This begins, of course, with a root cause analysis, but there you build out your remedial solution. For the compliance professional, Holmes does not view Eugenia's situation in isolation. He recognizes the broken system that enabled her suffering, i.e. her abusive husband. Likewise, compliance teams must go beyond punishing individuals to fixing structural issues that allow misconduct to flourish. Number 5, ethics and compliance must be integrated into your entire corporate culture. If there's one theme that is literally throughout the Holmes work, it is that. And it must be certainly one of the key takeaways from the 2024 ECCP that compliance is not and cannot be an afterthought. Holmes demonstrates that justice is not about rules, it's about doing what is right. Compliance professionals must shift from mere enforcement to cultural transformation. Sherlock Holmes obviously is not a compliance officer, but his investigative approach aligns with the modern corporate ethics and certainly those in the 2024 ECCP, understanding the context of the facts, ensuring fairness, and advocating for systemic justice. The ECCP update reinforces these principles, making it clear that institutional justice and institutional fairness are literally non-negotiable for the modern compliance program. For compliance professionals, the lesson is simple. Justice is not about punishing the guilty. It's about creating a fair system where employees feel protected, ethical behavior is the standard, and misconduct is addressed at its root. I hope you've enjoyed this episode from the final collected work of A. Conan Doyle on Sherlock Holmes, the Casebook of Sherlock Holmes. As I mentioned at the start of this podcast, the sponsor of the entire Compliance Podcast Network is Ethico. So check out their free offer in the show notes, the Middle Manager's Toolkit. I know you will find it incredibly useful as a part of your compliance toolkit going forward. If you are a Sherlock Holmes fan, aficionado, or maven, and you'd like to discuss an episode, a book, a short story, or a movie with me, I hope you'll reach out to me. I would love to visit with you. As you know from this podcast series, I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and I love talking to other Holmesians and Holmes-Lockians as well. The award-winning podcast Adventures in Compliance is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? Would you like to start a podcast? In 2025, I think it would be a great time for you to start a podcast, and you can post it on the Compliance Podcast Network, the only podcast network in compliance and by far one of the most popular B2B podcast network around. So if you'd like more information on starting a podcast, please give me a shout. You can reach me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Hope you will join us next time when we take up the adventure of Shostam's Old Place.